is proud to present Mr. Ederson Zanetti.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'll be talking a little bit about green building and specifically on the potential of wood use and my home, my life program in Brazil and the carbon implication of this, the spread use of tropical timbers within this program. To start with, I would like to point out that the global changes that have been occurring over the last, I don't know, 100 years more intensively in the planet have generate impacts on the tropics as well in the rest of the planet. And the main impact from the socio-economical point of view, I would say, is the transformation of timberlands from climax forest into natural modified, semi-natural or plantations. This is a consequence of our growing population, and due to that we have seen a decrease on the availability of trees for each person on the planet. Our rough calculation said that in prehistory and ancient history we had 27,000 trees for each inhabitant. In the Middle Age, it came down a little bit to 25,000. In the modern history, when silviculture started, we had some 4,000 trees per habitant, which was already showing up their deficit. I mean, early signs of it started in Europe, where the forestry started to develop as a science. Currently, our estimates say we have around 370 trees per inhabitant, and we also have a figure that said that each inhabitant in the planet demands something between 120 and 300 trees. So we will be in a yellow situation, and in the coming years we will certainly become in the red zones, which means we don't have enough trees to sustain our needs as a society and an economy. Well, the other impacts we have are the environmental ones, and the most the one that has concerned us mostly in the past years is the increase on CO2 levels and the increase in temperature that comes as a consequence of that. For the tropics, which are near the equator and get the pressure from climate change first, the perspective is an increase on temperature, of course, but also the immediate effect of the increase of CO2 levels, which fertilize the air for trees. And with a projection of reaching between 550 and 550 ppms of CO2 by the end of this century, the probability is that we have a 35% of net photosynthetic production increase on the region. Therefore, this increase is already causing a modification in the forest, which means old trees are dying, and the competition from, let's say, not the understory vegetation is increasing, which in the end will result in less carbon stocks in the forest. If we don't have some sort of management to take out the old trees and plant new trees and somehow deal with the competition, we have a tendency of losing carbon stocks within the tropics due to the lack of management. And that said, I would address the issue of red blues at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Brazil forest reference emission levels. I mean, for the payment, performance-based payments, the countries, non-X1 countries are presenting their biannual update reports on the reference level, so they can showcase how they are operating in order to reduce emissions, global emissions of greenhouse gases. If we look into the inventories that are the base for developing those performance-based payments, we would say that no country in Latin America whatsoever has included harvest wood products within the LULUCF or FOU pools. And a study done by ADB and Caixa Econômica Federal, which is a public bank here in Brazil, within 3 municipalities that included the harvest wood products consumption in their greenhouse gases inventory, showed that the impact on reducing emissions varies from 4 to 11%, 11.6% in some cases. Making it a relevant pool that should be included in the inventories, and it could be part of the strategies to reduce emissions from deforestation. We are clearly staying here that the wood consumption drives the increase on forest cover. I mean, FAO has a lot of figures on that on the last couple of decades. Well, in Brazil, we have this My Home, My Life program, which is a federal government program to address the issue of the social housing deficit in Brazil. It has a rural branch, the national program for social housing in the rural sectors in Brazil. And recently, in 2014, it approved 2 decrees, one from Ministry of Cities and another one from Ministry of Environment, allowing Caixa Econômica Federal, which is the public bank financing the program, to use wood housing as part of their financing, especially for the Amazon region. In the Amazon region, the deficit varies within the period that Brazil is accomplishing its voluntary reduction goals. It varies from 500 to 5 million social houses, the deficit we have over there. The decrees allowed for the use of over 50 native species of tropical timbers into those constructions, and it says that the communities using this wood to build their homes, they don't have to present a sustainable forest management plan, which means the trees can be taken out of the forest and used, and you don't have to plan for their further, let's say, for their secondary growth. And I'll address this in the last slide. But what I want to say right now is that we did an analysis on comparing the models, the traditional models of social wood housing in Brazil with social housing in Brazil, built on cement and iron, with the new proposal from Ministry of Environment for social wood housing. What we figured out is the replacement of the units generate an economy of 12.1 tons of CO2 per unit. But if we look over the production change on the impacts it will have on the increase the production within the forest, and we also inserted a management plan for the residue so it can be used for energy. We reached up to 83 tons of CO2 equivalent being saved in each unit. And that said, if we take those figures from 12 to 83 and with the deficit from 500,000 to 5 million, we can have an impact just by using wood into those constructions of between 60 to 400 million tons of CO2, which is equivalent to 7 to 75% of the actual Brazilian voluntary goals for the region, which is a very significant impact to be included on the national strategies for reduction emissions in the Amazon. Well, to conclude this presentation, I would say that the wood consumption here is clearly a driver of forest conservation, and for that we need to develop silviculture procedures. We need forestry for those 59 native species that will be used for building those houses in the Amazon. This is a clear avenue for technology transfer. I mean, developed countries are known to cultivate 95% of their area on their native tree species, and this silviculture should reach developing countries in order to provide a sustainable basis for development. We have a diversity of species that can be used for construction, which is a competitive advantage. We can offer several flavors of tropical timbers to be used in construction all over the world. And I would say that the public policies in Latin America and also all over the world should provide ground for the harvest wood products from tropical forests to be included into this effort of reducing global greenhouse gas emissions. And I would also say that we shouldn't be so concerned about buying credits for isolating areas. We should look into standards that could attach the carbon produced from sustainable sources to the wood that is sold. So this price tag to the carbon wood would generate the benefits to make the management plan sustainable. Wood, therefore, is good for REDD+. It represents, including harvest wood products on inventory and national planning strategies, it means to have an holistic approach to the forestry sector, not only deforestation drivers, but also conservation drivers, I would say. And we need to include those harvest wood products on the inventories that are currently being done by non-Annex 1 countries for REDD+. It has a potential, let's say, just looking at those three cases that I pointed out in Brazil, a potential of reducing 5% of total emissions on region, just by adding the harvest wood products. And if we add in a strategy, we can multiply these effects. And least but not less, the BRICS can benefit if they have a mutual accounting system for the sustainable wood that will be used and the carbon attached to that. I mean, we have Brazil and Russia as large producers within the region, and we have China and India as large consumers. If we have a system that would account for this wood consumption over the years, we all can benefit from the increase of harvest wood product consumption to benefit the socio-economical development within the region and also to generate an environmental friendly economy. Thank you all.